Welcome back to the How to Make Sushi channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make sauerkraut. Yes, I know, sushi channel, not really related, but I wanted to start making some more fermented foods on this channel, and I thought what better place to start than making sauerkraut, like the basic of all fermented foods. So I'm going to show you how to make the most simple sauerkraut, just a basics introduction into it. And we're not gonna add any like aromatics, no spices, no garlic, none of that. We're just gonna keep it very simple, just salt and cabbage. Now, I've seen a lot of videos on the internet showing how to make sauerkraut for the first time, and they all use white cabbage, which I feel like is the wrong thing to start out as a beginner, because when you start making something, you wanna have the most indicators possible to show you that you're doing the right thing. And with sauerkraut or all fermented foods especially, you wanna know that you're on the right track. So I recommend you use half white cabbage and half red cabbage. And the reason for the red cabbage is because it's basically a litmus test indicator. So it shows you whether something's acidic or alkaline by changing color. I'll show you that in a bit. And basically when you're fermenting foods, what you're doing is lacto fermentation, which means you're changing sugars into lactic acid. And that means the end product is going to be acidic. So we can test for that very naturally with some red cabbage, and just having red cabbage into it just makes it easier to see visually whether you're on the right track. So let me show you what red cabbage does, and then we'll continue making the sauerkraut, just so you get the idea of why we're using red cabbage. Okay, so let's do the little red cabbage experiment. I'm going to add some water and some red cabbage into a food processor. I'm just going to blend them together. And this will make sure that the water has some of the extracts of the red cabbage to show you whether something is alkaline or acid. And you can visually see this. So I'm just going to sieve it out so we have a concentrated liquid. I'm just going to dilute it a bit with some water in some shot glasses so that we see the results better. Now, the middle one is a control, and the left one I'm going to add sodium bicarbonate. That's alkaline, it will make it turn light bluish. And the right side I'm adding lemon juice, which is very acidic. And as you can see, it turns it into a pink reddish color. And there you can tell what happens, the difference between alkaline and acidity. Okay, so here we go. These are the results. Now, they wouldn't be this translucent. They would be much more darker, deeper colors. Like this would be not pinkish, it would be more reddish and deeper color red. And this would be a darker blue. But if at any point your cabbage or sauerkraut turns into a blue like this, give it a few days to see if it changes, but if it keeps going, you're gonna have to restart. It shouldn't happen if you followed the recipe, but you know, something could go wrong. You might have a scale that's off, or who knows. And if it starts going red, you're on the right track. So you know that you're making something safe to eat. Okay, so now that we know this, let's proceed to making some sauerkraut. Let's go. Okay, we're gonna take two cabbages, one red, one green, and we're gonna cut them in half, then into quarters, and remove the cores. So just slice in half, then slice the halves into quarters, and then at a 45-degree angle, remove the core, which is the hard part that you don't really want for your sauerkraut. I'm gonna weigh them because we need to add 2% salt. Now you can actually add between 1.5 to 2.5, but 2% is a good bet. Now you're gonna wanna slice it into very thin slices by hand, or you can use a mandolin to make very precise thin cuts. Just be careful with that thing. Now for the salt, I'm gonna weigh it out with a precise scale, and I'm gonna go for 2% because it's a very safe bet for the first time that you're making sauerkraut. You can always vary from 1.5 to 2.5. And once you've weighed out the salt, add it to your cabbage and crush it in. You really wanna break down the mass here and get the salt to penetrate into it and start to release juices. It's very important that it releases enough juices to cover itself. So here I'm just using a muddler just to crush it a little bit more. It's gonna take about 10 to 15 minutes just to get this to crush into it. Then you're gonna place it into your mason jars. Here I've got a special mason tops jar, which is designed for fermenting at home. I'll show you those in the end of the video. And I'm just using a muddler just to pack it down and crush it in. So just keep filling it up, and make sure that when you pack it in, the liquid starts to cover it over. If the liquid doesn't fully cover it over, you're gonna want to tip some out of your bowl until it fully covers it, and then pack it down. And here I've got a special piece of glass from this mason tops jar that will keep everything down under the water level. and a little nipple to let the carbon dioxide out as it ferments. Now, in the end of the video, I'll show you different options if you don't want to buy this specific kit, simple homemade systems. Always remember, put a little piece of masking tape on there, write down when you're doing this and what it is you're fermenting so that you don't lose track of it. Now, this is how it looks just after putting it in. This is 3 weeks later, but fermenting will usually take between 1 to 4 weeks depending on the temperature and the environment. You just have to go tasting it as you're making it just to see if it's at the level that you want. And once it gets to that level, then I recommend you remove it out of this jar, put it into the fridge in a different jar, and just try to consume it as quick as possible, but it'll definitely last about at least a month in the fridge. Look at that beautiful sauerkraut. Okay, so there we go. Now you know how to make some old school sauerkraut. Fantastic, delicious sauerkraut. I really love homemade sauerkraut. It's way better than store-bought. In fact, the store-bought stuff, sometimes what they do is they take the cabbage, cut it, and then cook it, and then add some vinegar. And you can see this on the ingredients list. It sometimes says just cabbage, water, and vinegar. And some will even say cabbage and salt, but they have to pasteurize it, so it's not the same. But either way, whichever the two options, your homemade sauerkraut is like 100 times better. So do make this at home, give it a try. It's delicious and fantastic. And you can add it to so many things. Like you can add it to sandwiches. Oh boy, you can add it to sandwiches. I love me a sauerkraut sandwich. Anyway, you can also add it to salads, hot dogs. You can add it like a little side dish on your main dish. It's so versatile. You can just throw it in everything. Probably even throw it in sushi. Who knows? Now, one thing I should mention is when you're making it, sometimes on top of the brine level, you can get something called Cam's yeast. It's like a white filament, stringy, sometimes has some bubbles because it captures the carbon dioxide. You shouldn't really worry about it. Only if it starts to turn green or black and fluffy, then you could be dealing with mold, in which case you might have to throw that out or like scoop it out, just see how it goes, but most of the time you have to throw it away. But that really shouldn't happen, and especially with your pH testing red cabbage, so you can tell the color difference, you should be fine. Now, if you don't have red cabbage in your ferment, you can always get one of these pH meters. They're very cheap, but we do have red cabbage, so we can tell what's happening. One more thing that I should mention is these jars, these great jars with the glass slugs that fit perfectly and the little nipple that lets the carbon dioxide out but keeps the flies out of your fermenting. These are fantastic. I actually looked them up and tried to find a product that would make fermentation very simple for me and for you guys. So I actually asked them if they would send me some of these, and they did. But I understand that a lot of you might not want to buy something like this to get going fermenting, so I'm going to show you some techniques of how to do this without these. But I will link these in the description if you want to buy that kit. It's a great kit. It comes with like the muddler, it comes with glass things, it comes with jars. It's really everything you need for it, and you can also use it for pickling or making kombucha. So, check that out in the link in the description. Now, if you want to make it at home without this kit, what you're going to need is a mason jar, and you just find a ramekin that fits perfectly in it, or a glass that fits perfectly into it, and just displaces the product below the liquid level and make sure that it doesn't touch the oxygen, so it doesn't oxidize. Another method you can do is you can take a mason jar and just take a Ziploc bag, fill it with liquid, and place it into the mason jar, and it displaces the air out and keeps it out of contact with oxygen. The oxygen is the dangerous part here. If it's in contact with oxygen, it could rot and start to create molds and all that funky stuff, which you don't want in your ferments. Okay, so now you know how to ferment stuff at home. Go ahead, ferment some stuff, go crazy. Do this one first, and then once you've mastered this, you can just go crazy with different flavors, different spices. You can use different vegetables. Just experiment, and great things will happen. Okay, see you in the next one. Goodbye.